Hey everyone, welcome to Fundamentals of Design, part of CGMA's Foundation and Design program. My name is Jason Louie and I'm going to be your instructor for the class. So I hope you guys are as excited as I am. It's going to be a great class. In this class we're going to talk about the fundamental principles and skills needed to develop and communicate your ideas. To be a designer in this day and age means you've got to develop relevant and meaningful designs and also be able to communicate both visually and verbally why your ideas are, say, better than the next designers. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover in this class. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself with a brief background so you guys know what you're getting into. So, I've always been a fan of art. Growing up, I would always do art, and I never really took it seriously. It wasn't necessarily a profession that I had in the back of my mind until I discovered design. And usually, most people think of design as either fashion or graphic design, but there's a whole world of design out there that I discovered. And that discovery took me to Art Center College of Design. So it was there that I studied transportation design, car design essentially, and we would develop radical concepts for the future. And there I learned a process that isn't going to be much different from any other creative process. And it's this process that we're going to be doing time and time again. And if you get this process down, you're going to be able to tackle essentially any design project thrown at you. There are lots of things that maybe you may not know about when you're faced with a new project. But if you have a solid understanding of what it takes to create something, then you'll have the confidence to really tackle a project head on, knowing that you'll develop the best result possible. So anyways, while I was Art Center, I developed this Honda project. And here you can see, started off with some thumbnails, a little bit of functionality, and a little bit of packaging and engineering, just to get a general idea of where this model or this vehicle, how it would be propelled and function and that kind of thing. And I developed a 5th scale model for it. Now, of course, we're not going to be doing any physical models in this class, but knowing how to create something in 3 dimensions is going to be very useful, because everything we do nowadays is going to be built in 3D, whether it's physically 3D or in a 3D computer program. So anyways, my journey through Art Center took me to a couple internships. One was at Mercedes-Benz. This studio was the Italian studio in Lake Como, and it was a great experience where I learned all about design. It was one of the most life-changing experiences ever, and we focused on interior concepts for future show cars or production cars. Did my own project there. Great experience. Came back, realized that I wanted to get into entertainment because, well, it's so much more fun. And so I did a senior thesis that was a little bit more entertainment-esque, creating a story and a scenario for the future. This was in the year 2040, and creating this rally race that would take place in Sydney, Australia. And the great thing about this project was I was able to tell a story. And what you guys will find is everything we do in entertainment revolves around a story. I created that model in 3D and built this environment for it. This was built in Vue. So going from 2D to 3D, again, very important. A lot of our first design sketches will start off as just a basic 2D line sketch, but the essence of that 2D sketch we're going to have to understand what makes that sketch cool and bring it into a 3D realm and really sell it, because eventually 3D is the end-all be-all for most projects. So here's some other concepts that I've done. Some photoreal matte paintings. Some black and white value sketches and paintings. Some other concepts. I really enjoy doing environments, creating spaces, and mostly because I think that tells a lot about a story, creates a setting. And stories are engaging, and they're the things that really keep our audience entertained. And as far as design goes, it doesn't matter what setting, what style, what genre, what platform, video game, film, animation, cartoons, comics. Our fundamental and foundation design principles are going to be the same across the board. So as I flip through these images, you'll see a wide variety of realistic versus stylized and animation style. But no matter what the subject is, no matter what the style is, the basic fundamental design principles remain the same. Some are based on life, some are based on memories too. And our job is to stylize and art direct reality so that it's interesting, engaging, and fun. So let's talk about that. Fundamentals of design. What does that mean? What is good design? What is design in general, actually? So before we discuss good design, we have to really define what design is. So design is a noun. I did some research and looked up the definitions that are out there for design. Dictionaryreference.com has this pretty vague and general definition. An outline, sketch, or plan as of the form and structure of a work of art, an edifice, or a machine to be executed or constructed. Sure, makes sense. Let's get a little bit more. Specific. So Paul Ralph, a PhD candidate under the tutelage of Yair Wand, came up with this design definition, and Paul Ralph was a software designer. So again, this is design in a pretty general terms. He says a specification of an object manifested by some agent intended to accomplish goals in a particular environment using a set of primitive components satisfying a set of requirements subject to some constraints. Subject to some constraints is really important. Everything we do is going to be constrained by either budgets, technological constraints. There's a whole world of constraints out there, and being a designer means mitigating those barriers and coming up with something that is fresh but also affordable within the given parameters. And the definition that I like the most is from Charles Eames, very famous designer from the mid-century. He says, a plan for arranging elements to accomplish a particular purpose. Very simple, direct, straight to the point, and we can use that as a guiding light for our designs, making sure that we have a particular purpose. So, what is good design? Good design is very, very subjective. You know, you could say our audience out there has tons and tons of different particular tastes. You as a designer may have a very specific taste, and those are things that you have to hold on to, because as a designer you've got to have a voice. But if design is so subjective, how can we really predict what's going to be successful or receptive to an audience? So, some things to consider. Our two most important things when it comes to design is clarity and purpose. Is our design clear? Is it too vague? Do we not have a specific direction? We want to aim for a clear reason, and that reason is our purpose. Whether we are designing for a product, for our screen, for a website, it's got to have a purpose. If it's superfluous, it's redundant. And our purpose in entertainment design is going to revolve around a story. Everything we do revolves around a story. So clarity and purpose. When you're designing anything throughout this class, any project you address after this class, always ask yourself, is my design clear and does it serve a purpose? Is there a reason? Is there a message behind my design? Some other things to consider. We could go down this list and address all of these things. And these are more of the subjective things that may change from audience to audience. But proportion, relationships, balance, geometry, space, rhythm, movement, contrast, tension, we can talk about all of these, and we will talk about all of these in this class. And these are theories that will, again, help serve your purpose and your clarity. So, design for entertainment? What does that mean? You know what, while I was in school, it took me a good while to understand what design was, what it meant to have a really good design, and why say my design didn't get picked over someone else's. And as my education went further and I started working, I started to understand how design works, and especially how design works for entertainment. So we've got three variations on the topic of design. Like I was saying, everything's going to revolve around a story. Is it functional? Is there a message behind our design? And does that message serve the purpose of our story? So from that, we can categorize our designs into three basic categories. We've got our 2D design, which would be our composition on a 2D surface, our basic silhouettes, right? Now, composition can be how things are arranged on a page, right? Or it can be how a design is composed in terms of the flat 2D space, or the flat 2D makeup of your design. And then we've got 3D design, which is our form and our space. So say you've got a painting, and you've got a painting of an environment with a vehicle in it. Our 2D design would be the arrangement of those elements on our page, where our car is placed, where the street sign and the road and the buildings are arranged on that page. And is that arrangement pleasing to our eyes in relation to the size of our page, in relation to the aspect ratio of our page? The 3D design is going to be what it would be like if we were to walk around these objects. If we're designing for film, most likely our camera is going to be moving around this object, so 3D design, obviously very important. If we're designing for an actual product, what would that car look like if it was right in front of our faces? So 2D design, 3D design, our basic dimensions to consider. 4D design is things like camera movement, how our camera moves throughout our scene. These are things that we're not really going to talk about in this class. We're mainly going to be concerned with our 2D and 3D design. So anyways, these 3 categories all feed the look and feel of a project. The brand, the art direction, you know, each movie, each video game will all handle these differently. Each company will handle these differently. Say DreamWorks, Disney, Leica, Illumination, all those studios will handle these elements differently. And then even within their own movies, they'll handle these elements differently. So that's really going to be our style and our brand. Another way to think about it is in this Venn diagram. For some reason, Venn diagrams make abstract ideas a little bit more official. So here we've got our all-encompassing style, and then we've got our different categories of design, all overlapping to serve the purpose of our story. Alright, so how do we do it? How do we create good design, good style, memorable, meaningful designs that will impact our audience? So some of the principal elements that we're going to be using in this class, and you've all seen these before, but we're going to break these down and really define what these mean. So first off, we've got line. And line is a representation of a surface. It sits on a surface, it calls attention to a surface, and it might be where 2 surfaces meet. You never really see lines. Lines don't exist in real life, but we tend to sketch in lines because they represent our surfaces. So here's an example of what that means. Got edges meeting, our surfaces meeting and creating these edges, and these lines are representing that, right? Okay, and then we've got mass, and a mass is our silhouette, our shapes, and the local values of those shapes. Here's what that looks like. So taking our abstract idea of what these shapes might look like using just lines, we can develop what that mass might be, or what that mass is on a 2D surface, on a 2D plane. We can represent those ideas using these basic shapes. And if we squint our eyes, we basically understand, given the silhouettes, and we've seen these shapes over and over again, we understand that these are dimensional. But those are our mass shapes, our very first read when it comes to looking at forms. And our next one is form. And our form is going to be our dimension, our spatial placement, and the representation of light on our objects. So this is really going to carve out the volumes of our objects. This is what that might look like. So placing a light in our scene, and we get we see the effect of that light on our objects. When we do paintings, remember that we're not painting the actual object, we're painting how the light affects that object. And when we put a strong light on that object, we really get to see and really get to define that volume really well. So how do we use these concepts in our sketches, in our development for our designs? Well, here are some examples. This is from my Honda project from when I was in school, and take a look at the sketch. It's essentially mostly line with a little bit of mass blocking in these general shapes where these shadows are, and I've got a little bit of indication of form with these contour lines, but in general this is a line sketch. Here's a mass sketch where I'm blocking out the general silhouette of an object using big blocky shapes. And I've got a little bit of line indicating the details and the contours, the shapes of it, which indicates a little bit of form, but it's mostly mass. And then here, I'm really rendering out the form of this object. You can see the radiuses of these edges. You have an idea of where the light source is coming from. You got some shadow shapes. You've got some ambient occlusion where the light isn't hitting. And a little bit of line where I'm showing off the contours, and a little bit of mass where I'm blocking out some of these dark shapes. But in general, we've got a form study sketch here. Now, when you're doing sketches, when you're doing artwork, we're going to use these three things as a springboard for our creative expression, right? But you don't want to use all these things equally. You want to have a dominant line sketch or a dominant mass painting or dominant form painting. If you have equal parts of all of these, you end up with a confusing and less clear image. We want to strive to hit one of these marks when we're developing our sketches and our paintings. So let's briefly talk about style. We mentioned style really quickly, and this is a chart that helps describe the world of variation within style. So you've got up here the visual look of the world, ultra realism on this end, and very stylized on this end. So if we look at this top row, got Black Hawk Down. The art direction of this film is pretty realistic. It is art directed, but it feels like we could step outside and see this scene. Then going across the board, we got Blade Runner here, Sin City. As we move across, things are just going to get a little bit more stylized. Up with our animated characters in 3D. Then here we're getting into The Illusionist, a French animation film, and the art direction you can see is just a lot more flat and graphic and really interestingly different from, say, Black Hawk Down, a realistic type movie. Over on this axis we've got the physics of the world, and this is the way that how physics and nature and how the world works in our film or in our game or in our animation. So moving down, we've got Kill Bill, where we've got people flying all over the place. I mean, it's still realistic, but it's still a little bit the physics are pushed a little bit, you know. We're not really going to see blood spurting out as much as we see in this movie, right? And it's a fun movie, and because the physics are affected. Star Wars, you know, the idea of the Force and whatnot. Then you've got Lord of the Rings here. That starts to become a little bit more abstract. And then down here we've got Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where you've got rivers of chocolate flowing. And then so we've got this whole wide variety of different physics and visual looks that we can place our film or our project in. Over on the polar opposite axis of Black Hawk Down, we've got the Looney Tunes, where our physics and our art direction is completely wacky. You've got anvils dropping on characters. You got roadrunners being chased by coyotes. You've got dynamite blowing up characters dying and coming back in the next episode. You know, it's completely wacky. In the middle here, Sky Captain, The World of Tomorrow. A little bit stylized and a little bit, the physics are a little bit different. Halo, just under it. You know, our animated features over here, they're mostly going to be stylized in art direction, depending on them. Finding Nemo, pretty stylized. Although you could argue the physics are a little bit different, having talking fish, but you know, that's why it's here. You got Zelda, Super Mario Brothers. Down here, we've got Cat in the Hat, pretty wacky movie. Corpse Bride. And this is The Secret of the Kells, a really great animation. The art direction is really awesome, all these watercolor backgrounds, and really the physics are kind of trippy too, so definitely check that out if you get a chance. Up here we've got The Incredibles, Minority Report. So if you keep this chart in mind and ask yourself for every project you do, where's my project going to fit in this world? Now, a lot of the exercises we're going to be doing is looking at stylized art direction, but that doesn't mean that you can't play with realism as well. But then think about how, if your physics are going to be stylized and abstract, how would that affect your design? Okay, so for this week, we're going to address a lot of these concepts that we've talked about. And we're going to use these concepts as building blocks for developing our own project and our own voice. And we're going to start by exploring. Let's turn on our title here. This week we're going to start by exploring our basic shapes. We're going to address how to sketch out these basic shapes using line, mass, and form. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the demo. So we've got Photoshop open. Now, for some of you, this may be the first time that you're using Photoshop, so what I'd like to do is kind of go over my workflow and how I utilize Photoshop. And if you guys have already used Photoshop, bear with me. I'll go over this quickly, but I think it's helpful for us to kind of go over different workflows. It may work for you, it may not, up to you. So what we're going to do first, open up a new file. And under US paper, I use tabloid just because I like the size of it. The aspect ratio feels nice and wide. So make sure you work in 300 dpi. That'll give us a nice high-res image for us to work with while we're sketching. Okay, so I'm going to hit. You can work in letter if you like, but I prefer tabloid. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. It opened up in my other screen, but here we go. Now I'm going to do image